Good morning. Day 3, the home stretch. I want to start off by telling all of you just to give yourselves a round of applause because making it into the first morning session of the last day is quite an achievement. So well done, everybody. So this is the peering and interconnection reports, and for a long time in the past, the conversation was about fixing problems in Africa, and what we eventually realized is that you cannot fix something if you don't know what you're trying to fix or exactly what the problem is, reports and statistics and measurements and that sort of thing go a long way to helping solve that problem. There's obviously a lot of good work that's been done in that space. So we're going to start off with Gael from PCH, who is a senior researcher. And obviously you all know PCH and all the good work that they do. So thanks, Gael.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Je vais parler en français, car comme on est en Abidjan.
Well, I will speak English, so we are in Abidjan. Please put your headsets. Well, I would like to thank you all. It's good to see you all, even though we see some empty chairs. We have a number of graphs, not too much writings, and so it will be very interesting.
Voilà, c'est bon. Alors,
well, 5 years ago, we prepared this first survey, peering survey experience, and it was a survey that we conducted on the peering agreements. We asked all the suppliers to answer 3 questions. Is the agreement a handshake agreement, or we just got a shake our hand, or is there any document which describes all the requirements? Is it a symmetric agreement where the 2 parties exchange different things, or are we exchanging different models? And what is the country where the governing law is applicable to the agreement? And this is what we asked 5 years ago, and we analyzed about 142,210 agreements from 4,331 internet service providers network in 96 countries, and you have the results in the link below. And the report was interesting according to the sector, to the industry. So they downloaded more than 500,000 times in 5 years. So we promised to repeat that same survey every 5 days to try to illustrate some trends in the industry and try to build a time series data that will help us to analyze the historical development of these peering agreements. Why is it interesting? As we were able to see the nature of the peering agreement, which 99% is an agreement where the two parties understand the terms. In fact, it helped the various stakeholders in the various sectors. Most of them are network operators, so they agreed to exchange traffic without any regulatory support. I mean, external regulatory support, which will be very hard to harmonize. We're talking about internet and everybody, many actors, I mean, commercial stakeholders, university stakeholders, I mean, academia, government agents. But we all here, when we talk about peering, we understand what we mean without any necessary regulation. In fact, it helps us to understand how the self-regulation can work. And so we, in that new survey, we added a new question, and because you asked us to add the question, and it's normal. The interest of the IPv6 is an interest for all. In fact, is to understand the rationale of the agreement. And so, let me try here to describe. Something. All the agreement that we receive, we analyze about 2 million agreement, which represent more than 10,000 carrier network in 148 countries, and include all the 35 OECD countries, which are industrialized countries, and 21 countries which are considered as UN LDCs. And so we we recorded a stronger increase in the African countries that responded. We have 9 countries which responded at 100%. And as you can see, we have a number of countries in Africa for who we did not receive any answers or response so far. I want to seize the opportunity to thank all the networks who sent replies to us and encourage them for the next survey scheduled in 2021, and I encourage you all to participate because it is an agreement. I mean, a survey that we conduct with network operator groups, regional level and national levels. You may see a message that pops up, and if you check very well, you can see something like that. The graph gives a kind of distribution. The darker colors represent the networks that give a response with a higher number, and now the proportion of representation on this slide in the horizontal axis shows clearly the top 30 countries, and the red line in the graph represents the number of network represented in the whole set of data, and the line at the bottom represent the transit networks, and the upper line represent the network which is not yet completed in the process. In fact, all this is to show you that the replies or the answers, the responses that we received so far, in general, will include providers who provide transit services. And so we have a good generic proportion. It's not only small networks that responded. We have a good mixture of networks, national networks, and networks that provide international transit services. The 4 more important countries include the United States, Russia, Great Britain, and Germany. these are the 4 countries that sent more responses. We were able to find Indonesia the 5th position, and we will try to explore as we continue the presentation, try to show why they have been able to move to that position, because in the past they were ranked 18. Now they are 5 in the list, and in fact it has to do with the various numbers of multilateral agreements that they have been able to put in place in their exchange point. Now, to ensure that the networks that responded understood the questions very well, in fact 49.35% of all the responses that we received comprise 477,755 matching pairs. In fact, the network that did pairing responded with the same content. And so it means that the 2 networks understood things very well, and in more than 90% of the case they gave the same responses, or they gave the same answers. 5 years back we did better. We were at the rate of 99%, but we think that it has to do with the last question on the IPv6, and sometimes when we add a question we have more possibility to have a disagreement or some mismatch between the answers. In fact, to validate the answers, in addition to receiving replies from the network, we also organize meetings and discussions with 35 networks to better understand what they said and how they said it, and so that we can put everything in order. Now, what are the key findings that we were able to achieve so far? We will try to disclose them as we continue the presentation. As you can imagine, we'll give some figures that explain things on the 2 million agreement that we received. In fact, you tell us how we structured them. We saw that 99.93% of the agreement are informal agreement, I mean handshake agreements. We just shake our hand and we say, okay, we're going to go into a peering business. There's nothing like a bureaucratic job or a formal contract signed. And as I said earlier, it is not a kind of representation of small providers that give this result, because the major providers who are the backbone are present in all the data. And one of the discovery that we were able to get from the discussions is that the agreements that were signed, when they expired, they are not renewed. In the beginning, they are part of this written agreement, and as time goes by, the agreements will not resurface, because the terms in the general perceptions are recognized or are agreed to. This is why with time we move from 99% to 93%, but we'll see the results in the years to come. We equally found that 99.98% of the agreement are symmetric. Agreement has symmetric terms. Sometimes, even though we have the impression that some of the network want to push the idea that peering is something which is very common in the industry, the reality that we saw through that survey is that things are not like that in reality. It is real, it's there, but it's still going down in terms of number. I'm talking about the number of agreement with symmetric terms that are yet increasing. We also found that there was a strong preference in the country where the law is applicable. It has to do with the relation between the providers on the issue of the content. It is how we can find that in countries like US, Canada, and Japan, there are some priority cases after years of the Snowden case. We have the Iceland and Finland that we added to that list. However, the less favored countries where the law is applicable will be Romania, Ukraine, and Russia. So it's what we found in our survey, and this year we added China and Thailand. So it is a graph. In fact, you can find the extreme sides of that graph. On the left side is the country which is mostly used, and on the right side is where it is poorly used. We equally found that almost all peering is multilateral peering implemented through root servers and multilateral agreements. In fact, the difference of a bilateral agreement between parties, it is an agreement where we have two groups where the interest is that when we enter into the agreement, we authorize other parties to come on board, and the number of interconnection and let's say the square of the numbers of the network which are into that agreement is also increasing. We already recognized in 2012 that it was a clearly defined trend, and it's more and more clearer. And we foresee that in the future it will be something so usual that we would not be able to do without it. We would not be able to do without a system of a strong increase in exchange point in the interconnection ecosystem. And we also have here a very interesting graph that I will try to decode here. On the vertical axis, we have the number of network. And on the y-axis, we have the network, and the x-axis we have the interconnection group. And we have a higher number for a graph where they have many network who have entered in partnership with other networks. As we go further, we can see a number of peaks, and you can think about these peaks as representing those multilateral agreements. And what we can see on the graph is that there is a highest peak with the multilateral agreement in Moscow, and the other one from London, and the Russia is 418, which means that about 110 networks are connected to the exchange point in Moscow. They are connected to the root server, and automatically they have 418 interconnection partners. And this is what you can see where I'm putting the green light. And the second point that you see on the pic is the multilateral agreement of London. And if we go further, we can also see something substantial. It is the Jakarta Agreement. We'll be talking about 1,021 interconnection partners. So it's like you go into a room and you have 1,021 partners who are ready to go into exchange. This is the effect of the multilateral peering agreement. Now, if we zoom in, the Jakarta Matrix Exchange MLPA, you can see in more details what the graph tells. And the idea is that in that 1,021 we have many networks that go without agreement, and you have about 20 networks that we have the 1,000 with the direct root server connection, and another one we can be in another action point, and that. And so all what you see is the effect of the networks that are interconnected, not only with the Jakarta Exchange Matrix Exchange, but they have other interconnection partners. It's a bit complicated to read the graph, but I can assure you that there is a report that is available, and it will help you to understand what it's all about. Now, what are the countries that benefit most from the MLPAs? We in that graph you can see three elements. We line the countries in the x-axis, and you can find the number of multilateral agreement here on the bottom line graph, and the number of participating networks on the red line, and the number of AS agencies is the blue line. And so we can see that, for instance, Indonesia is there. The three multilateral agreements offer 1,021 networks, and that number of contiguity is about, let's say, a little more than 1 million. So, in fact, it's a way of analyzing things and see how some countries are using or exploiting, how the exchange point in the countries are using that way of interconnecting based on the multilateral agreements. And you have some analysis available in the report. Now, I may not have good news for you here. It has to do with the V6 traffic. And we found that only 3.88% were for exchanging of IPv6 traffic, and the rest do not exchange IPv6 traffic. So it's not good news. So we need to capture these figures and ask questions to ourselves to see if our network is doing IPv6 or not. And what we found at the end of the day is that there is a strong difference between the major networks and the smaller networks. You can see that Russia had the highest number of IPv6, and it was continued by Ukraine, Brazil, and the United States. And all the countries were below the average. Now, is there any bigger difference or major difference between the IPv6 when it comes to larger network and a smaller network. For the larger network, in our average, they announce 100 prefix for V6, and a major part of the period had V6. This is the larger one, but now the remaining 50% is contrary. 80% didn't have V6 at all, and they were not changing the prefix. Now we found that if we don't continue to develop or build the competencies or the skills and migrate for smaller networks, these discrepancies will increase in an alarming manner instead of reducing. And so we, with the PCH, we try to analyze and check if there is a correlation between this peering agreement with V6 support and also the percentage of traffic which is exchanged with the V6 at the exchange point levels. We found that there was a correlation. I don't know if you were familiar with the exchange point directory. You can find this on our website. We added a column in all the exchange point who want to have statistics on the V6 traffic, where we'll be very happy to publish them. We just, in fact, the exchange point just started to work on it, and some have found some added value to present it publicly. So what we do normally is to aggregate the data and make them available to the community at large so that they can understand the development of interconnection worldwide. We equally tried to see the correlation to understand if the countries that are using V6 more had a relationship with the per capita GDP. If there was a relation between the per capita GDP for the country that were using V6, and then we saw that there was no correlation at all. It's a very interesting graph. We found that there are some countries that have high rates where the GDP was low, so we were not able to see any correlation. Now I'm coming, let's say, to the end of the presentation. We equally did some analysis on, in fact, to see the relation between the international and national agreements in terms of network. The darker areas is where there is a relation between the number of network agreement between network from the same country and with another country, and it was highest. And the nuances that we can find in this graph is that countries like the US, Brazil, Russia, Australia, even though they are shown, that doesn't mean that they have a highly developed international connectivity, but it's like they have a very highly developed national interconnection system. And if we go further and we look into things very well, we chose the countries, the 4 countries, which are most, which are more represented into the system. The UK, United States, Brazil, and Russia and Germany. We were able to find the partners of the American networks, and we could see that in general there is a tendency, as you can imagine, to see a substantial number of partners at domestic level, which is the domestic interconnection system. So there's an exchange of traffic with them, and after that we can find nationalities of network with which there is also exchanges, or there are exchanges. The bigger cycle is for V4 traffic, and the small one is for V6 traffic. The United States is a little exception of what I said, because they have only 23%. Now, if we move on to the Russian ecosystem, we can realize that they have up to 57% of traffic. No, 50%, 57% of domestic agreement. Why? Because we know that the exchange point ecosystem is very developed. Each exchange point in Russia has multilateral agreements, and the figures, the answers that we received give a clear idea of that environment, and you can see the number of interconnected partners. You can see for the United States, 6%, Germany 5%. Now, for the British interconnection partners, we can find an ecosystem which is more or less domestic. You can see the partners as well. Now, I will now close this chapter with Germany. The relation between the countries where there are international agreement will depend on the correlation with a commercial agreement or diplomatic agreement or other agreement for goods and services. In fact, these are the results that you can see in the report. And finally, we can also show the Indonesian interconnection partners where there is about 50% of this agreement which are domestically operated. And this is the last. I think that I've taken a lot of time, and I think you did not sleep so soon. Thank you for your kind attention. Now we're here to answer to all the questions that you asked me. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was great. Thanks very much. Are there any questions from the floor? If not, I want to ask a question. I mean, there was a bit of a gap there on the African continent. What are the difficulties in getting that data from Africa, and specifically on the west side?
I don't know. We should ask people here in the room. These are the networks. Generally, what we ask, or the way we ask to send us the data, was relatively simple. So you could basically, produce a script that we just were getting a plain text data for every network, ASN, and then yes, no, true, true, false, true, false, true, false. So it was relatively easy to. There is a lot of white, but I think I said that there was a big improvement from the previous. So I think we also need to see in relative terms we've improved from the previous. And something that I wanted to say just before maybe someone takes. It would be very, very, very interesting if we could talk about amount of traffic exchanged. But this is not about the traffic. This is about the agreements, right? Agreements are. If we were to talk about traffic exchanged, we couldn't do this. That would enter another territory. So we're happy enough. We're very glad that networks rely and trust us to provide us with this data, and we will be very happy to continue doing this and giving this feedback back to you guys. Thank you, Andrew.
If you would have asked us, I would have provided data, but I never received any communications.
The way we circulated was using regional NOGs and national NOGs when possible. We translated the introduction and the questions to French, Russian, German, what else? I don't know if we did Arabic. Did we do Kiswahili maybe? No, we didn't. We're happy to keep it. I mean, this is something we do. It's not that we do it on your behalf, but we're happy to continue doing. And maybe next, for the preparation of the next one, we can get it translated into more and make sure. I know.
Who do you send it to?
I think it was sent to AFNAC probably. Do you want to? Yeah.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Nishal and I work with Gael. Specifically for the African region, we sent the mailing list, we sent the request to the different African mailing lists, so the NOGs as he's mentioned. We also reached out to every single internet exchange point manager in every African country that we have record of. And I know that's because I did it personally. So we sent it out to a lot of folks. Now, to answer the other question about why there isn't a lot of African data, that's actually not quite true. In a lot of countries, we did get close to 100% participation from a lot of the African countries. The problem is really that the degree of interconnection is so low. So, for example, if you look at the extremes, if you look at Indonesia, you've got 1,000 networks that are interconnecting with 1,000 other networks. So 1,000 times 1,000 gives you 1,000,000, and that's why you see Indonesia at the top, as Gael explained, right? But in a lot of the African countries, you may have 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 or 5 network operators, and they're not always interconnecting with everybody else. So the information that we get, I mean, you're looking at numbers or interconnection numbers that are in the region of about 20, maybe 25, sometimes even less than that, frequently even less than that. So that's why the African countries don't appear as well represented, even though in some cases we did get close to, as I said, 100% returns from them. But with both Gael and I are here, and we're very happy to engage you to understand how we can reach out to you better to get more information for the next survey, as he said.
Yeah, so it appears a lot of white, but the shades of blue were not, the data was not normalized. So you could have a lot of white, but having, as Nishal was saying, a lot of respondents.
So it's not necessarily an indication.
Yeah.
Of
So sorry if I transmitted like the wrong idea to the room.
But everybody in the room now knows that he's going to be top of the list in the next survey. So. All right. Any more questions? Nothing. Okay. So we're going to rush on to the next presentation. I don't know if you've seen this guy. He sort of hangs around these conferences a bit. Carl's going to come and talk to us about AFIX, for the African Internet Exchange Association.
Right, good morning everybody. While I wait for the slides, I'll just briefly sort of introduce the presentation itself. It's one that I've been giving a lot lately, and it's because it includes some data that's been collected over the years, including some research that we've done over the last couple of years ourselves as the African IXP Association. And it really does an excellent job of showcasing what's happening in our region, and that's critical, especially because there's been a lot of growth. A lot of people outside this region don't really know what's happening down here. They think it's still the Middle Ages, and actually, as you'll see in this talk, it's not. So by showing this outside the region and to people from outside the region, we highlight the success that we've had. And then internally, when we look at this data, also we can find areas where we need to improve. So just briefly about myself, I'm a director of the Uganda Internet Exchange Point. I've been living in Uganda for about 10 years. I help coordinate the African IXP Association along with Nishal, but everybody really chips in, so it's a community effort. And then through that, I help the Internet Exchange Federation, where I'm on the board by way of what we do at AFIX. And they're a, pardon me, they're a global collection of regional IXP associations, so the African IXP Association, the Latin Americans, And I do a few other projects as well. A notable one perhaps is online multiplayer video gaming. It's something we're trying to promote in the region, and it relates to network interconnection. We're doing that in partnership with Liquid Telecom. So the African IXP Association is a group of exchange point operators. We have a lot of shared interests and a lot of shared challenges, so we all got together to exchange knowledge and try to improve the state of our industry. We try to create an enabling environment for exchange point operators, help them maximize their value, and generally improve connectivity within the continent. It was originally launched in 2012 at this event in Johannesburg. We've been a member of the Internet Exchange Federation since 2014. At the moment, there's 38 Internet Exchange Point operators in 29 countries out of 55 in the African Union. Welcome back, Morocco. And we host biannual meetings. We had one earlier this year at the African Internet Summit in Nairobi. And this is our second. I think we had 18 IXPs represented in the room on Monday. We host a private mailing list for exchange point operators so that we can all coordinate and share information that's relevant to us all. And as you'll see in this, we research and publish data about our region. And you can always find out more and get access to a lot of this data on our website. The URL is below, and it'll also be at the end of this slide. So growth in Africa. This is, most of the data you'll see in this is up to date as of 2016. So these are conservative numbers, generally speaking, throughout the presentation. But you can see right now on the blue line, see where the laser is, yeah, this blue line here is the total number. So you can see we got 37 up here. And this little pulse along the bottom, the green is the number of exchange points that popped up in that year, and the red is the ones that sort of, for whatever reason, were no longer active exchanges. You can see that there's recently been a lot of growth over the last, say, 7 years. And a lot of credit, I think, goes to some of the, AFIX was launched here, we've got the Access Project, and there were others, so this is not exclusive. Traffic, this is a big one. I think in less than, Machuki carried out a survey in 2008 that said that there was 160 megabits of total traffic flowing through all exchanges in Africa. And today we don't have an exact figure, but it's at least 234 gigs in 2016. That's something like 145,000% growth, right? And the data's a little off because there's a lot of different people that have been collecting it over the years with different measurement standards, and it's reported differently and so on. But the trend is clearly, as we like to say, up and to the right. There are some important notes. This is not necessarily all peered traffic. There are some exchange points that carry transit traffic because of the way that they're set up. So you have to take that into account as well. But nonetheless, it's a significant growth. The number of connected networks has grown likewise, I think by nearly 500% since Machuki's survey in 2008, which is the oldest source of data that I had available. We've now, in 2016, based on the survey data that we got back, there were around 800 connected networks to the exchanges. And I imagine that number today is actually far higher based on some of what I'm seeing. It's good to take a deeper look. So what's going on in governance models back in 2008? This is really good data. Thank you for capturing it back then, Machuki. We had a predominance of ISP association governed exchange points. That made sense because back then all the big networks were internet service providers, and they had the ability to set these things up. But as you can see now in 2016, we've had a lot of growth in private not-for-profits, as well as a couple others. We've got government exchanges popping up as well. So part of what's happening there is that increasing diversity at exchanges has made internet service providers somewhat of a special interest group. Right, so as you now have banks and enterprises and content networks and stuff connecting to your exchange, they can no longer be exclusively governed by one subset of the membership. I think Jinx, for example, actually started as an ISP association and recently transitioned into a not-for-profit that's independent from that ISP association. So taking a quick look at the facilities. Tried to assess facility neutrality, but that's a little bit of a tough one because in reality that has a lot to do with the environment of the facility in terms of, is there shared infrastructure, is there diverse infrastructure going into it and so on. But the facilities themselves are largely neutral. We had at least 10 of the respondents say that they're in carrier neutral data centers, which is a really great number to see. A lot of others are in government facilities, which in some cases are neutral and in some cases are not, depending on the nature of the market that they're in. So your mileage may vary. And then we had a few that were in network operator facilities, but as you can see over time, that number has not really grown. And I think that's because, as we all know, it's a bit undesirable for an exchange point to be in a network operator facility. And then there's some academics and others. So what's inside these facilities? Well, the general quality of exchange point facilities has improved greatly. Again, your mileage may vary, but these bars, nonetheless, what people have in terms of biometric security, fire suppression, power backup systems, even in the limited amount of time that we've been capturing data ourselves, that has really improved. But as I said before, some of us may have power backup systems that may not function as well as they should, and so your mileage may vary. Staffing, we tried to get a sense of full-time, part-time staff, volunteer, paid, etc. So there's a pretty healthy blend of both. A lot of IXPs having full-time staff and part-time staff and utilizing a bit of both. Paid staff is, I think, still minority, but it's still getting up there, and that's a good thing to see. And that goes to, fees, right. So we asked a new question in 2016 about contracts. So is there a formal contract required to join the exchange? Now, unfortunately, we only had 23 out of 37 exchanges, 38 actually, now. It responded to that question. So this could be off by a significant amount. But the majority of exchanges responded that they require a contract of some kind to join the exchange. So that wasn't the case if you go back only a couple of years. Fees. About half of IXPs charge fees, and those that don't, most of them that don't have some other source of funding, almost all of them that don't have some other source of funding intend to. So the ones you see in gray that have no plans to charge fees, they usually have some other funding model. They're like NAP Africa and Terrico, and similar stories where they don't ever really need to consider that because they've got a different model. But those of us that don't have that model and we're sort of independent from the facility, have a need to have some source of funding. So I think that's what you're seeing there. House rules. So back when Machuki captured the data in 2008, there was a lot of mandatory multilateral peering. When you went into an exchange, you were forced to peer with every other network there. And today we see that model has not really won out. And what has is multilateral, where you go into an exchange, you choose who you peer with, and a route server is available so that you can plug in once and connect to a lot of other networks easily. We've also seen over the years the rise of a couple layer 3 exchange points, but that's something we're trying to work on. Value-added services, we've got like 90% of exchange points that we're aware of have some form of VAS, whether that's root DNS nodes. There were 3 in 2008, now we've got, I'm sure, over 21 now. We had 21 in 2016. CCTLD servers, route servers, of course. Looking glasses have doubled, I think, in only the 2 years that we've been capturing this data as the African IXP Association. So we're seeing a lot of improvement there as well. Just a few final observations. As I mentioned before, we're seeing increasing diversity in internet exchanges, which is a really good thing. More content, government, enterprise networks. Most of the internet exchange points in our region have websites, but this is something we need to work on. Many are poor quality, don't list members of networks, so aren't really selling themselves as well as they could. Some IXPs also are struggling internally and don't capture some internal data like traffic statistics and stuff. So there are a few areas that we as a community can work on to try to improve our standards. Thank you. My email is there. If you have any questions, visit our website. I'd also like to note that we've recently launched the 2017 survey, so we're capturing data for that. If there's any exchange points in the room who haven't filled that out yet, please do. And thank you to all that have, because we wouldn't have this data without it. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. Hands? No? Have I explained it so well? None of you have any questions? Martin, please.
Kyle, excellent. Leading question, because you showed a number.
My favorite kind.
But I know you could calculate this maybe off the top of your head. If you go back to the graph and look at the amount of bandwidth over Africa, yeah, that one. Give me a ballpark figure on how much money is being saved.
I couldn't do that because I don't. That's something I should try to get a handle on. But the cost of the alternatives in the markets varies so much. I could tell you that for Uganda or maybe the other countries in East Africa because I know what the alternatives are and what they cost and stuff like that. But across the continent, I don't have enough information to say. But I could say easily with authority that it's a lot.
I'll take a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Try to work on that. Any others? Yes.
Thanks. We were having a small discussion this morning, and I would like to know if in your investigations concerning the governance model, do you have some data showing the number of governance model which include government staff? Ministry or regulator, for example.
So are you asking within government-run exchanges which agency?
Yes, if government is included in the governance model of the IXP.
Right, so hold on, what we do capture is government. So we know that we have, in this case, we had 6 IXPs that were governed by a government entity. And I think if I look a little bit deeper into our data, I could find which type of agency, but we don't go quite that far into detail. So what we have is kind of voluntarily provided in addition to this.
Okay. In the ISP association, for example, is government included? But not the main actor, the major actor of.
So that I'm sure happens in some cases, but we don't actually, as part of this research and survey that we've done, I don't have good data on that. Other questions? Jane?
Just to elaborate on the question that was asked, can you also let people know, you know that governments help some IXPs, they don't manage them or operate them, but they help. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so a lot of, there's an increasing amount of interest from governments across the region, and they're helping nurture exchanges to get them start up. And that can end up in a variety of different models. You can end up with an exchange point that's actually managed by or governed by the government. The government can give birth to one that's an ISP association or a not-for-profit. But we're seeing increasing interest from governments across the region, which is really a good thing. I mean, sometimes governments press the wrong buttons, but generally this is great because that little bit of help sometimes is what's needed. Sometimes it's a matter of just getting all the right people in the room to agree that this needs to happen. Sometimes it's a little bit of money, So, yeah, indeed. Yes. No. Maybe try one next to you.
Is it working now?
Yes, thank you.
So hi, my name is Todd from Orange. I have a question. You said 38 IXPs are part of the association.
Right.
How much does it represent compared to all the other IXPs which are not maybe part of the association now?
So the African Internet Exchange Point Operators Association is a bit informal. So we don't have like a formal membership process at the moment. In the future, who knows? But for example, we're the only exchange point association in the region right now, and we generally just count the exchanges as our members. Though we have people coming to us when they start exchanges and stuff. So there's, so we don't like. Yeah, go ahead, Nishal.
So the simple answer is that for every legitimate exchange point in Africa, we have 100% membership.
Okay.
We do define exchange points, though. So there's a minimum criteria. You have to have 3 or more networks peering, etc. So.
Yeah, I was curious about how many. How many do you cover versus the whole IXP's number?
Right. This is all of them. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, Ben.
Yes, as you're looking at sort of IX members in Africa, are you sort of looking at what business sector they're in? Obviously, IXP Association is mostly ISPs in this room, right? But there's other people who will see IXPs as being interesting, like media companies and banking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing change, or are you seeing a change in who's joining, and are you outreaching to other associations like media owners associations and things like that to try and raise awareness of IXPs and the importance to those industries? So it's quite well understood in the ISP world, the importance of IXPs, but other industries possibly not unaware.
Indeed, good question. Yeah, so within the data, and I didn't really put a slide together for that, we do capture which types of networks are connected to each of these exchanges. So as we develop this, the output data a bit more, we will include some of that data. In terms of relating to other associations of that nature and trying to create outreach, that's not something we've really done too much yet, but it is something we should definitely consider in the future. But in line with that, also giving this presentation as much as we can to different regions and in different places, sometimes which do involve those elements, is helping to drive the message a little bit more too. So, any last questions? And then I think I'll cede for the sake of time. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gael. I just want to add into that the question about the governance model. There is no one size fits all. So whether you have government involvement or whether it is a service providers association, it doesn't matter. It needs to be whatever works for your particular market. Okay, so moving along, we have Simon. I said it. Apparently say it in many ways. Yeah. I think you're going to do it in French as well. From France, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Simon Muyal, and today I will do the presentation in French. So, as Gael, so please put again your headphones.
So I am going to showcase to you today the African Trafficon, which is exchange on the Transix POP. So I'm the technical manager of France X. So I can answer any type of question regarding this company. So today I'm going to give you a reminder. We have a presence in Paris and in Marseille. Then I'm going to zoom in on Marseille and African partners that are connected to Marseille. And I will conclude by giving the detail of the traffic, the type of traffic which is exchanged by African and operators on our POP. So France X, we are an action point in France with a presence in Paris and Marseille, and our values, core values, we try to build a community around internet. We are neutral, and this is our strength, and this is one of the key success factor of France X when we created it in 2010, and the most important thing was all about neutrality. Our mission is to develop internet by improving quality of exchanges through, let's say, French operators, with also content and suppliers who come and pick up content in France. If I want to zoom in on Paris, we have a 9 point of presence in various data centers, and in Marseille we have 2 POPs, and the first one being, let's say, on Interaction MRS1, which is historically the major data center where all African and operators arrive. And the second POP, we wanted to set up a second POP in the second major data center, which is called Jaguar. And in order to provide redundancy of 2 operators, we wanted to get secure double attachments to Marseille. So the key figures of France 6, as I said, it was set up in 2010, and since then we have been an action point which is quite recent and compared to other European exchange points. And we have more than 350 connected networks, and the updated list on our website, you can browse at it. And if you want to get the comprehensive list. So today we have about 60% of French, let's say, stakeholders, and we also have 40% of international stakeholders who come for content in France. Now, if I want to zoom in on what we take a keen interest right here, this is African operators and France 6, and we have 11 let's say single or operators that are connected to Paris and Marseille. And now I'm going to zoom in on Marseille, which is going to be our keen interest. In Marseille we have 6 African operators which I've just listed, and which crash the traffic from let's say Algeria and Djibouti Telecom. And in Paris you can see that there are 7 of them. Seacom, you have Djibouti Telecom, and we also have other single networks which are being connected to Tunisia network, Telma, Grof, and Madagascar. And we also based on resellers who enable us to transport and up to our point of action when they don't have marine capacity. So we enter into a partnership with BIX and then AFIX, and also Telecom with Angola Cable. We made the announcement on last Tuesday. Marseille is naturally the preferred location to exchange traffic by African operators, and this can be explained by 2 reasons. We have an historical reason. We have 13 marine cables in Marseille, so this is one of the main arrival points for African capability into Europe. And the second reason is that the data center in which we are is a neutral one. There is no regulation, and there is no barrier to exchange traffic over there, as is in a number of countries. So this is the arrival point for African nations who want to do an exchange of traffic towards Europe. I'm going to provide you with some specifics about the story behind Marseille, and I say it again, France 6 was set up in 2010, and we saw the interest to set up an action point in Marseille. Why? Because as we have said, we have seen that this is an international hub to exchange traffic. However, we were faced with a problem. Who is going to cope? Are there going to be African operators or content vendors? There were a number of African operators coming to Marseille. They didn't used to have any, let's say, the POP, and the capacity and ongoing capacity to Marseille was going to Amsterdam, London, and Frankfurt. And that is why we said now we are going to make arrangements in order for us to also exchange with the content vendors. So we had our point of exchange in Paris. We had a preferred relationship with many content vendors, and we spent about a couple of years to persuade and convince them. We told them, okay, come over to Marseille. You don't have to carry through your traffic throughout Europe, and you can. And then some were convinced quickly, some were convinced subsequently, and then we have the content and international vendors that you are all familiar with are connected to France 6. And in 2016, when we want to make the situational analysis, we managed to have, for instance, to also persuade African vendors to start exchanging traffic on our exchange point, and it was quite successful. We have the first, let's say, exchange experience in 2016, and to operators or content vendors, and in 2017 we connected our 40th network. So this is an exchange point which is still expanding. So some statistics, and out of 11 POP, 9 in Paris and 2 in Marseille. Marseille accounts for our second largest POP, location in terms traffic-wise. So now I'm going to talk about the distribution of the networks. We have about 40 networks, 1/4 of, minor local operators, players, who have about 10 of them, and 10% are CDNs. So you can have, of course, Google and Akamai, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Cloudflare, Limelight. So you can have an idea about the players that are connected, and 50% of African networks. And of course, we also have marine, cables to marines also carried Middle East and Asia, and operators accounting for 10% from, Middle East and Asia. So at the end of the day, we have about 15% operators from France. The point was to convince them and who are present in the Paris POP to travel down to Marseille and create attractivity. So of course, we have SFR, Bouygues, Orange, and who just recently connected, and medium co-operators like Jaguar. With this, if we want to do some traffic extract with all aggregated operators, we can see that the traffic generated by African operators account for 30% of traffic exchange in Marseille, which is a bulk of our. We can say that we had a successful bet, and to make it an international hub, so that we can connect network from Africa and Middle East and the rest of French operators and or content vendors. The interesting thing is that what proportion of traffic, what is the content of this 30% African traffic? We did some extraction, and the first fear that we had is that we didn't want that African operator will come up to Marseille to exchange traffic with African operator. To mean that it is not good. You are traveling across Africa to do exchange, and fortunately, when we have less than 2% among, intra-African exchange. So then there is no surprise. We know that the African operators come to get content, and I mentioned Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Limelight, and so on and so forth. And moreover, among these 80%, there is one operator, a hosting company, which is called OPH, and they are very popular to host francophone content. Why? Because there is no facility in some African nations and to host, and it is being set in place. It's taking time, so people rely on international hosts, and most of the time they select OVH because they have French and French-speaking content, so they have a presence in Marseille. So all African carriers who are hosting, websites, and they come and collect this content from Marseille. When if they don't have the possibility to host it way back in Africa. So 5 to 10% of traffic is meant for French operators, and this is something that is important. And there is a new trend that we have been observing. A year ago it was 0%. Today it is increasing. This is the traffic done between Asian, Middle East carriers and African, which means that sometimes Marseille is used as an interconnection hub between Africa and the Middle East. And this is a trend that we noted with the connection of some Middle East and Asian and connectors, and that can become an emerging trend. So this is my presentation, and I hope that you have learned a couple of things, even though there were no more there were no, let's say, surprise regarding traffic, and at time the African operators used to exchange with Middle East operators. I'm done with my presentation. Should you have any question or comments, they are welcome.
Hello, sorry, English. I'm Frank from Tanzania. I would like to ask on the last slide, number 12, the 2% between African and African operators. How much the absolute number is, megabits or gigabits, the 2%?
Megabits.
How many megabits?
2%, 10, let me calculate. So around 200 megs.
So that could stay in Africa?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I don't know, it's a misconfiguration, or if it is well-known traffic that there is no other way to exchange. These statistics are aggregated and anonymized for sure, so I cannot tell you which network are exchanging with the other one, but for sure we can work together. You are not connected to France AX for sure, but I can share this information with the related networks and try to optimize. Other questions? Autre question? Oui. Yes.
Bonjour, je vais parler en français. Cédric de Afrinic. J'ai deux questions.
I have a couple of questions. The first one has to do with...
concerning Marseille as a front line for the African countries to make a peering with Middle East. And do we have countries like northern African countries such as Egypt or Turkey or Tunisia? Don't you think these countries would be more appropriate for peering business? I fully agree with you. You should consider Marseille as the reason why we created Marseille is because content providers, some of them had deployment strategy in Africa, which is a stepwise process. And we knew this will cover years before they achieve a global deployment of the CDNs in Africa. And this is why we said this was just a step in the optimization process, and the best was to make sure that all the CDNs are available in all the African countries, and we knew that this will involve some time. As a result, we focused on Marseille as a temporal solution. And to also address your question, it is the same applies to the exchanges between Africa and Middle East. Geographically speaking, we have some more optimal locations in terms of pathway and latency compared to Marseille, but Marseille is still a good middle way for such exchange when the other optimal solutions are yet to be implemented. Another question that you mentioned, you said since the CDNs are expected to shift towards Africa, so when this happens and content is made available, what will be the future of peering in Marseille? I think it is a very good question. We can see today with the direct interconnections on the exchange point, we can see some traffic from the exchange point for a direct connection or for the optimization. So I'm sure that when Africa and Middle East will be fully developed, maybe Marseille will no longer be operational, but I'm sure this will happen in a very long period of time, and we still have a long way to go in Marseille to optimize this exchange. And of recent, we've seen a connection with the Middle East network, and we've been able to secure 15% in terms of latencies. We moved from 30 milliseconds to 80 milliseconds. So we can see that Marseille helps for optimization, and latency is very meaningful. And the carriage to Europe is small, but when it is compared to the submarine transport, is very interesting. So why don't we use Marseille, since it helps to optimize both latency and the exchange of traffic?
Hi, yeah, maybe I just want to add to that with the network operator perspective. I think yesterday we were talking about whether Nigeria will become a West African hub of connectivity, but I think in North Africa it's extremely unlikely, looking at the way the cables are laid out, that any one African country will become a regional hub of connectivity. So it's far more likely that places like Marseille and even Lisbon will become the regional hubs of connectivity for those North African nations. So I think definitely it's a very long time before any North African country will become a hub for North Africa.
Yeah, we are in touch with North African countries. We help one data center to build the first exchange in Morocco, for example. It's called AFIX. So we are in touch with them. We are trying to help them to optimize traffic. I'm not talking about to create a hub in the North Africa, but at least to help them to build an exchange and to open the regulation when it's possible. But we know that it takes a lot of time. So that's why we are continuing pushing Marseille, because we believe that we can do some optimization of the traffic for Africa today.
I'd also just like to add, so Marseille has been a bit of a contentious issue in certain sectors, but the fact that traffic exchange is happening in Marseille doesn't prevent exchange points opening up in North African countries. They're not blocking anything at this stage. As Simon said, this is a stepping stone, but it certainly doesn't prevent anybody from setting up exchanges in North Africa at all.
And I remind that also France helped ISOC in access programs to build IXPs in African countries. We are very active on that, and we would like to put additional resources. We are a small team. We are 4 years ago when I arrived, we were 7 people. We are today 14, and we would like to be 20 and dedicate resources for helping Africa to develop IXPs also. Okay, thank you.